Shabbat Shalom. It was once said, money, if you'll pardon the expression, is like manure. It's not worth a darn thing unless it's spread around, encouraging young things to grow. This great wisdom comes from one of my most favorite movies and most often quoted in our home, Hello, Dolly. Dolly says the line early in the movie, quoting her late beloved husband, Ephraim Levi. And as the story goes, she needs a sign from her deceased husband that she is free to marry again. She, of course, has her eye on the curmudgeonly, tight-fisted Horace Vandegelder. Not known for his generosity, his character develops through the story so that by the very end, when he tells Dolly that he's hiring a young painter to give him a start in business, because after all, Dolly, money, if you'll pardon the expression, is like manure. It's not worth a darn thing until it's spread around, encouraging young things to grow. When Dolly hears Horace quote her husband, inadvertently, she knows that Horace has finally become the mensch that she needs. There is so much in Parshiot Kedoshim. Almost every verse of it could be parsed and studied and debated. But when you step back a little bit from it, this is a parsha written in the ancient world, and so much of it so relevant today, that lets us know how to act like a mensch in this world that seems so often to be a little bit wanting for mention. Of course, a mensch can be male, female, or any chosen gender. And Kedoshim, with its so varied and interesting and fascinating opportunities to be holy, to rise up from the quagmire of the world, it's a handbook for menschlichkeit. And one of the ways that we are absolutely exhorted to be a mensch in this parsha has to do with encouraging things to grow. And when they grow, to not keep them all for ourselves. A little earlier than where we began to do the reading today, in chapter 19, verse 9, we have the law of leket. When you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not reap all the way to the edges of your field, or gather the gleanings of your harvest. You shall not pick your vineyard bare, or gather the fallen fruit of your vineyard. You shall leave them for the poor and the stranger. I am the Eternal, your God. And later in the parsha, part of the piece that was read today, chapter 19, verse 23, when you enter the land and plant any tree for food, you shall regard its fruit as forbidden. 3 years it shall be forbidden for you, not to be eaten. In the 4th year, all its fruit shall be set aside for jubilation before the Eternal, for worship purposes. And only in the 5th year may you use its fruit, that its yield to you may be increased. I, the Eternal, am your God. So much of Parshat Kedoshim, and those 2 laws in particular, are about personal restraint, are about knowing the difference between what is, quote, ours, how much nothing is really ours, and about the value of patience, the value of gevura, which is a wonderful word that can mean strength and heroism, but it also primarily means discipline. It means to be an adult. It means to be a mensch. It means to not pick your vineyard bare, which is literally so and figuratively. I'd like to share with you today stories of two mention. One, quite literally, spreading the money around, and another to honor a woman whose survival and fortitude and faith and goodness exemplify Menschlichkeit. Of course, you all heard the story this week that Bill Gates, founder of Microsoft, once the richest man in the world, announced on Thursday that he now plans to distribute virtually all of his wealth, around $200 billion, he estimates, within the next 20 years, before the Gates Foundation will close on December 31st, 2045. Gates wants to accelerate the foundation's work on global health and equity initiatives and hopes the move will set a model for other billionaires, he said on Thursday morning. Along with his ex-wife, Melinda French Gates, and Warren Buffett, they launched the Giving Pledge in 2010 to encourage wealthy individuals to donate most of their money during their lifetimes or in their wills. It now has more than 240 signatories. Gates, who turns 70 later this year, wrote, "People will say a lot of things about me when I die, but I am determined that he died rich will not be one of them. There are too many urgent problems to solve for me to hold on to resources that could be used to help people." The Gates Foundation was founded in 2000. It has already given away more than $100 billion, including to develop new vaccines, diagnostic tools, and treatment delivery mechanisms to fight disease around the world. Gates increased the pace of his giving in recent years, especially following the pandemic. But this is a dramatic acceleration in the mobilization of his wealth. It's not worth a darn thing until it's spread around, encouraging young things to grow. Over the next 20 years, the Gates Foundation will focus on three main goals: ending preventable deaths of mothers and babies, eradicating deadly infectious diseases, and lifting hundreds of millions of people around the world out of poverty. Taken straight out of this week's Parshiot. And another mensch. This week, German Holocaust survivor Margot Friedlander passed away at the age of 103. She was born and raised in Berlin. She was interned at Theresienstadt, but survived the end of the war and came to the United States. The death of her husband, Adolf Friedlander, and a memoir writing course at a community center in New York City propelled her back to her hometown. Margot's prodigal return to Germany, where she dedicated herself to sharing her story with young people, made her one of the most prominent witnesses to the horrors of Hitler's regime, Yimach Shemo. For her work promoting historical memory, she was given awards and showered by praise from political leaders from both sides of the Atlantic. She said, "Perhaps the generation now that hears me in schools will one day say something to their children. I have no idea how far that will go." She preached mutual empathy, loving your neighbor as yourself, as an antidote to the world's evils. She said, "Don't look at what separates you, look at what unites you. Be human, be reasonable," she said just last year. She was born in 1921 to a family of button makers and trained as a fashion illustrator. She was 21 in 1943 when the Gestapo came for her 17-year-old brother Ralph. Arriving home, Margot spotted a stranger by the entrance to their building. The young girl covered her Jewish Star of David, passed the man, and knocked on a neighbor's door. Soon after, she learned that her brother had been taken and her mother, Auguste Bentheim, had turned herself in to the police to be with her son. She left young Margot a note by which Margot lived for the rest of her life. The note from her mother said, "Try to make your life." Try to make your life. That stayed with Margot for the rest of her days, as with the amber necklace left to her by her mother. August and Margot's brother Ralph were deported to Auschwitz. Her father, she would learn much later, was also murdered in the gas chambers. Margot lived for more than a year in the underground, dyeing her hair red and submitting to nasal surgery to appear less Jewish. The people who protected her risked everything to share a bed and their food with me, she told the Hamburger Abendblatt in 2010. Eventually, she was stopped, asked for her papers, denied any due process. She confessed to her Jewish identity and was deported. She met her husband Dolph at the concentration camp, and after the liberation of the camp, they were married. Margot returned to Germany in 2003 for the first time since she had left. She's the subject of a documentary, and in 2010, at the age of 88, she decided to move permanently back to Berlin and recovered her German citizenship. "I only got back what belonged to me," she said at the time. She became a voice of moral authority in a country still trying to make amends for the atrocities of the Nazis. She was garlanded with awards, including Germany's Federal Order of Merit, and was on the cover of the German edition of fashion magazine Vogue in 2024. Former US President Joe Biden told her that he was honored to be in her presence, and the rest of her life she dedicated to speaking to young people, touring schools, and answering questions about her life. "I concentrate on telling them, stay careful, watch that something like that never happens again, not for me, but for yourself." Her last public engagement was just a few days ago to mark the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II. "Be human. That is what I ask you to do. Be human," she said. Zichrona livracha. Be human. Be a mensch. That's what this Parsha is all about. That's what the activities of these extraordinary people tell us over and over again. Share what you have. Give thanks for your blessings. Try to make your life. Plant for the future. And if you are blessed, spread it around and encourage young things to grow. Shabbat Shalom.